Hello, it's episode 154 of Grow Yourself Up. And today I want to talk about some practical things around this holiday period, how you can set your family up for success around this time, what I'm talking about when I use the word success. And also I'm going to focus a bit on our stress responses so that you can kind of really consider how to tend to both yourself and your children and have as good a time as possible in this time. So I talked last week in the episode about rage and making space for your inner baby. I talked about how this time around Christmas, so it's also Hanukkah, it's many kind of holiday periods around this time. And it's a time that we tend to go into peak fantasy. And what I mean by peak fantasy is we go into this imagination of what this time has the potential to be like and what other people's families are doing. So if I think about my own fantasy about this time, I imagine, do you remember that movie, The Holiday, with Cameron Diaz, and she swaps a house with, can't remember who, Kate Winslet, I think. And, oh yes, Kate Winslet. And that cottage in that movie, The Holiday, that's what I imagine a Christmas cottage would be, even though I grew up in South Africa and had warm Christmases, with an open fire. So not a wood burning stove, but a real open fire. And then I imagine that there'd be like a large table with a group of people who all get on really well. There would be no fighting. There would be lots of kind of joyful conversation. It would flow really well. I'm not sure who would be doing the cooking because in my fantasy, there's no stress about like the food burning or the turkey being too big for the oven or, I don't know, fights about roast potatoes or who's going to tend to the washing up or who's going to run the dishwasher or whatever. So I guess my fantasy is that the group of people would be like the housemates from Friends who always seem to get on so well and deal with like little bits of conflict really kind of smoothly. So listen to how, I mean, this is so fantastical. And then the food would be food that everyone would enjoy, which is actually totally nonsensical. I even know within my own family, my husband doesn't like, so he's French, but he doesn't like cheese or coffee. And I really like cheese. I mean, not that we eat a lot of cheese at all, but anyway. But so, and our children don't like, and there's also some French stuff that I find really, I don't like at all, that he really likes and that his mother will serve when we go there. And our children like different things. They're starting to like more of the same things we like, but even with the context of the small nuclear family of 4, there's many different selections. So you can hear that my fantasy is literal rubbish because it's not going to apply at all to my family. There's always the reality of what comes in. But that's what I imagine. I mean, and that's woven together by probably thousands and thousands of movies over the years, somewhere in my subconscious. And last year, I did try, and after Christmas, we went away to stay in like a rented house in the UK, and we had a fire. Because of fire, when it's cold, we don't have a fire in our, or we do have a fireplace, but it's like a gas fire. And it does have real flames, but I really would like a real fire with real wood and real flames. That's in my kind of vision. But so, and my fantasy obviously encapsulates all the best bits of things. And so I want you to notice, what is your fantasy? What is your fantasy of what your Christmas or your family time or your Hanukkah or whatever you're celebrating is going to be like? And let's get really honest about how it's completely made up. So just look at notice what your peak fantasy is and notice, where does that come from? And likely you've never had anything like that. But it doesn't mean you can't. I mean, like, for example, I got the fire and I really loved that. That made me feel so joyful to build a fire and have all those flames and everything, like watching the firelight. So, but equally, it doesn't make sense to imagine that like a family grouping is going to behave like the cast of Friends. That's just sort of nonsensical. Anyway, so notice, where have you gone into peak fantasy? Where are you also expecting yourself to be different to how you are? Often we do this when we go on holiday or when we're going to other people's or there's a kind of a new scenario. We almost imagine that there'll be a new version of us. And really, we take ourselves wherever we go. We take ourselves with our issues, our idiosyncrasies, our little foibles, our humanity. It goes with us everywhere. And you're wonderful in your humanity. Just notice where you're kind of having this fantasy about yourself, about how you'll be different too. Because the peak fantasy is when we feel kind of devastated or sad or miserable, like we're having a rubbish Christmas or that everyone else knows how to do this better. It's because we're comparing ourselves to this fantasy, basically. And I really want to help you think about how you can have family success for your family and how you can enjoy yourselves. So Christmas is just one day, just the 25th of December. But actually, quite luckily, this is a time of year. So in the UK and in South Africa, I know the US don't have so many bank holidays as we do, or holidays around this time, but and so maybe not as much booked off time. But this is actually a time of year when people tend to take time off work. So there's a potential to actually be together for up to a week with your family. And so there is the potential for some really lovely connecting time, for some like real kind of honest, loving time where you can play board games, where you can go for lovely walks. If you're at the beach, where you can go swimming together or suntan together or have lovely barbecues. But what often happens is we're in so much fantasy about how things could be that we forget to notice the absolute beauty that's unfolding in front of our eyes. So I really want you to think about how you can, I'm going to talk about this in more detail, but setting yourselves, your family up for success so that you can actually enjoy some of this connecting time. Like make the best of the time together. Have some connection. Do things that work for your family. So I want to talk a little bit about success. Often, if I think about what it maybe used to look like to have a successful outing, it was based on a lot of arbitrary behavioral outcomes. So could my children sit still? Would they eat the food that was given to them? Would we have to constantly keep on getting up from the table? And I want to really challenge that for children, for all of us actually. There's a lot of really unrealistic expectations about how children are meant to behave in society. And it focuses on things like, it weaves through all institutions. Schools expect children to sit cross-legged, especially in the UK, cross-legged on a little mat for like quite long periods of time to be still and to listen. That's impossible for many children. I would argue it's not good for any child because we all need movement, and movement is really essential for learning. And we need more movement and less sitting. But it's kind of seen as a success if the child is sitting and being immobile for long periods of time. Really, I don't think that's success at all. But this type of kind of behavior is really celebrated. Like if you're driving around to see lots of different relatives in a period between Christmas and New Year, and you're carting your child in to see all these people, then good behavior is often praised as quiet, immobile, and just very, very polite. So kind of not talking too much. And I would say, why are we celebrating this in children? Where are we allowing the vitality of children to come through? The energy, the joy, the chatting, the movement, the jumping, the playing. Why do we consider a success if child can just remain still and not moving? Because I would suggest that we might be really encouraging the children to be in freeze or collapse or shut down. And I think that this does happen at schools where they're kind of pressured and shamed into doing things that are not natural for them in terms of, sitting still for such a long period of time. So I really want you to notice, what does success look like for your family? So in my family, success means that we all get to enjoy ourselves, that we all have periods of connection, that we all have periods of, so I need some downtime, my husband needs some downtime. My children, I don't think really need downtime from us. They would be happily with us all the time. And they are with one of us most of the time, or they have some quiet time, sometimes listening to stories or colouring by themselves, or recently they've been watching baby videos of themselves on my iPad, which I'm happy with. But so for success in our family is that we mostly remain regulated enough. We do some of the activities that we would like to do together as a family. We have connecting time. Us, the parents, don't lose it too much. And we see the people that we'd like to see in ways that are manageable and workable for us. So what does that look like in your family? How can you set yourselves up for success? A lot of what is considered to be, often we would not find it successful if our child has a meltdown every time we go and visit someone, or if our child is shouting and screaming at the table all the time. But I really want to gently challenge you to think about, how are you actually setting your family up for not having a successful time? So say if you've got a child who's prone to dysregulation and struggles with transitions, are you driving them around to multiple different relatives or multiple different outings on a daily basis and not giving them enough downtime? That might be causing the dysregulation all by itself. And then you might be getting cross with them or thinking they've badly behaved or labeling them some other way, when really they might need more downtime. They might need more scaffolding around going to these outings. They may need to be just not included in these outings. It might be too much for their nervous system to constantly perform at this sort of level. So really notice, how are you demanding of yourself and your family? So if I think about my family, for me, going to multiple different outings on sequential days feels too much. I like to have an outing and then maybe a day at home the next day to just go for a walk, do some cooking at home, lie on the sofa, lie on my heat pad. And this is I'm talking during holiday times when I'm not working. I don't like to be rushing around constantly all the time. I used to love rushing around all the time, but as I've got more regulated, I find it too dysregulating to do all of that. And I really like to prioritize how I spend my energy and also with who I spend my time. I'm kind of not into tolerating people who are assholes or people who are very dysfunctional. I'm not interested. I don't have the energy for that. And previously I would have been much more shape-shifting and trying to be like this good person. And I'm giving up on being a good person. Not in a way that I'm turning myself into an arsehole, but I'm not going to perform and shapeshift constantly in some to sort of fantasy please other people. So how are you managing this holiday time? How are you actually building in space for you to have a break? So that might be negotiating with your partner for a break. How are you making sure your children actually have enough downtime and get enough sleep? If you're constantly having big outings and you're having to go like driving all over the country, that's not going to help them get enough sleep. And then there's going to be more stuff for you to manage from a dysregulation point of view. So think clearly and kind of carefully about how you structure your time if you're having time off together as a family, and how can you set each member of your family up for success. So if you have one child who gets really dysregulated in big groups, or who really doesn't like noise, how can you support that child so that the whole family can have a joyful time? Because if you constantly throw that child into difficult situations for them, then that drains the family energy and the whole family nervous system will get way more stressed. So it might be that you take headphones for that child, or they sit in a different room, or you take a sensory tent with you. There can be many ways that you put in place adaptations or scaffolding or support for someone to enjoy things. But think ahead about that. Think ahead about, if you take that particular child to a whole lot of new places, what additional strain does that put on you? And we really have to kind of have the courage to come back to what works for our family. How can we be most loving and present for ourselves and for the people that we love the most? Your immediate family, I presume. And a lot of what like historically, we've expected, in my opinion, way too much from children. We've expected children to operate at like a superhuman level and to be able to operate in a way more regulated fashion than many adults can operate. And so that might play out in your own family. You may have older generations or grandparents who expect children to be like seen and not heard and very quiet. And that clash of cultures in a lunch or a dinner or something can be difficult to hold. So how can you manage that and have, not penalize your children for being children, essentially? So because a lot of what is considered, and I'm using inverted commas here, is considered bad behaviors, is actually stress responses. So I'm just going to run through for children what some of the stress responses will look like. And I mean, it's very similar for adults, except there's sometimes different behaviors. So if we let's look at freeze first. So freeze is when, and this is all involuntary responses. So that will be when a child shuts down or their mind goes blank. And one of my daughters sometimes goes into freeze, or she more goes into freeze than my other one. And she gets very pale. Her eyes get glazed and kind of blank. She gets panicked and anxious. Then another thing of freeze is that they might want to, there's difficult with completing tasks. They get zoned out. They might start daydreaming, not able to move, feeling in shock, a bit depressed, numb, apathetic. They might want to hide and isolate themselves. So sometimes if someone's in freeze, then they do want to go into a sensory tent or something. And perhaps they might need gentle movement or support at that point. But if someone is in freeze, they might not be able to respond verbally. They might just say, I don't know. They might seem confused. So if your child, if you notice that if your child is like white as a sheet and her eyes are glazed, maybe do some gentle movement, some warmth, like the warmth of a hug, some deep pressure contact, literally a little bit of movement. So some stretching, going for a little walk with them. Sometimes I do tapping with my daughter, who emotional freedom technique. If your child, so a common one that we kind of comes with a lot of shame is fight. So if your children typically go into a fight response, they might start screaming and shouting. They might swear or use like really bad language. They might hit, kick, bite, throw things or punch things. They may deflect responsibility depending on if they're older. They may be defensive. And adults also do this when they're in fight. They're defensive, they blame others, they're deflecting responsibility. Children in fight might be very demanding or controlling. And this is all to try and protect themselves. So these are our stress responses when we're trying to protect ourselves the best we know how. Often in fight, children might be named oppositional or defiant. And they might tend to seek out what's threatening. So in a fight, obviously you're moving towards the object that gives you, that is causing you to be stressed, which is why you might be moving towards someone to punch them or hit them or something. And they might just be kind of really angry, shouting, aggressive. And that type of behavior is often very shamed and very misunderstood. So our stress response, we go into our stress response when we've had too many signs of danger for our nervous system. So if we go back to that, how do you set your family up for success? If you have a stressed child and you are constantly putting them through multiple transitions and expecting them to kind of perform, or if you're doing that to yourself, you may have a sensory meltdown and so might your child. So think carefully about how you structure your day so that you can have some joy and some enjoyment and some connection, because it's difficult to connect to family members who are constantly in their stress responses. And this is not a conscious choice. This is the physiological thing. So from a nervous system point of view, if we're in our stress responses a lot, at a high level, it means that we probably need to complete some stress responses in our body. We may need more resources, and we need more opportunities for down-regulating and resourcing ourselves generally. So we might need literally more peace in our day, more gaps, more spaces for movement, for swimming, for lying down, for being undemanded on, if that makes sense. Flight is also one of the common stress responses for children. So wanting to run away, wanting to escape, unfocused, hard to pay attention. And this is also the same for adults. Often when I'm noticing I want to pick up my phone a lot, I'm in a flight response. I desperately want to get away from things, and I'm trying to use my phone to regulate myself. And that's when we're also unfocused. We find it a struggle to pay attention. The child might be restless. We ourselves, I notice I sort of move from task to task when I'm in this sort of state. We come across as preoccupied, trying to do everything but what we actually set out to do, and procrastinating, avoidant, and trying to get away from what feels threatening. So I have a daughter who also goes into flight, and she wants to run away. Sometimes she said she wants to move to Paris. And so I've learned how to be with her in flight. And sometimes it's actually letting the flight response happen is okay. I think that we're not trying to shift these. We can't kind of control this. We're trying to support in whatever way that we can. And if my daughter needs to get away from a situation, then I will go and be with her or let her know. She often runs up the stairs, so I might go and sit on the stairs near her. Or I might sort of sit a few steps below her and just let her know that I'm there for her. And when she's ready, I'm there. Often she wants to know that I am coming. So I won't kind of just leave her. But children they have different nervous systems. Some children, even when they're in fight, they want us to be close by and there. That my other daughter is more like that. She wants me, if she tends more to go into fight, and she doesn't like it if I get cross and then move away. She wants me to be there with her. And so then I help her move through the fight by pushing against a wall, by doing some movement, by metabolizing the anger through her body. And when my other daughter, who tends more to go into flight and freeze, then I will go and be with her. I will bring her back when she's ready into the situation. I'll do the tapping for anxiety. So there's many different ways to support ourselves. And we ourselves will go into our stress responses when we have got too much being demanded on us. So think carefully, be very gentle and kind with yourself. You will also demonstrate and again, I'm using this word under, in inverted commas, you will be criticizing yourself for bad behavior when you may actually be in your stress responses. So try and set yourself up. When I'm talking about setting yourself up for family success, what helps you regulate? What helps you kind of come back to yourself? I like some alone time. I like movement. I like sun in my eyes. I like a hot shower. I like periods of not being asked questions. What helps you come back into yourself and not be disconnected or dissociated or shut down or kind of low-level raging and angry? If we're low-level irritated all the time and kind of snappy, that indicates we're in a fight response. And hormone like things might also kind of exacerbate that. So be gentle with yourself. But really notice this, take on board this information about stress responses, and you might even use that to psychoeducate some of your family members, and not that it's your job to do that, but if you are trying to be in connection with people who have different expectations of how they believe children need to be, you might say they get very stressed in this type of situation. That's their stress response. They're not misbehaving, please don't make lots of comments. And we might go for a walk when we're there. As soon as we get there, they might go and sit in a different room, and they might eat different food. They might need to have noise cancelling headphones on or something. And you can, so that you can kind of, if you want to foster closeness, by kind of sharing some of what's going on in your own family. Okay, so one of the ways that one of the things that I always consider really carefully is family regulation. How can we all have, how can we maximize our enjoyment here and just be as peaceful as we can with each other, what needs to happen. And these are adult tasks, because your children don't know about what helps them get regulated. You might be teaching them over time, but this is not something to outsource to them. This is something that you need to take control of. So, for example, if we are going to different visits, or we're going to go and have a lunch with someone where we need to sit for a period of time, or where, I don't know, we're not quite sure the scenario, we might stop at a playground on the way and get out some energy. We might go for a walk as we arrive. We might use the entrance into this place as an opportunity to go for a walk. If you are going somewhere and you've got very high energy children, and maybe the house is quite small, or there's not a garden or something, or you go into a flat, think about what toys you could take that help. So we've got these toys, these like jumping pogo sticks. They're made of rubber. They do have noise and light, but they're very easy to pack, and you can jump on them, and you get a lot of proprioceptive input from the jumping, and it's fun, and it requires, you have to keep your feet very firmly on these little sort of, I don't know, it looks like a little brick basically, and then you hold these little hand things and you jump. And so that's kind of joyful. It can be done in a very small space, and it's not too annoying, and it's movement for the child's body that can be very supportive. We've got these things, I don't know really what they're called, but they're like proprioceptive suits that the girls can wear. They're made of like lycra, and you could lie on the floor and do snow angels, and you get a lot of proprioceptive input from the suit. I've seen on social media a thing called Nesty, which looks kind of similar, where it also gives proprioceptive input and is kind of very containing. So that might be something that helps your child regulate. Sometimes people have swings that you can attach to door frames. My children would be too big for that now, but if you've got say you've got a small baby and you actually want to sit and have a lunch with someone, you could put your baby in a swing and let them bounce a bit with their legs free. You can take scooters or skipping ropes and go scooting around up and down the street or the place you're going to. Skipping ropes are also great for getting some jumping and proprioceptive input, and can be really fun. Generally, whenever we're on holiday or when we're at home, we get out of the house twice a day, even if one of them is only for 15 or 20 minutes, and even if it's raining and we're going to go and jump in puddles for 20 minutes. It's always an opportunity for creativity. My kids, they love just kind of going around near where we live and scooting through the rain. And it just requires me to go and walk around a bit in the rain, which I have a rain jacket. And I need to get out and move myself around a bit. So I would always suggest getting out into the fresh air as much as possible. When you're going places and you're thinking about your family regulation and your family nervous system, keep on thinking about where are we trying to perform for some fantasy set of either good manners or kind of really antiquated expectations about how children need to be. So I don't understand why we try and make children sit for a long period at a lunch table with adults eating food that they really hate. How is that helpful? I don't consider that to be helpful. I don't think that it's demonstrating a sign of success to be able to sit still and eat things you don't like. How can we be raising adults who are ultimately going to be confident and tending to their own needs if we've taught them to subjugate those needs in childhood? So it might be that your children sit in a different room and watch TV. It might be that they have their own screen and they watch that. It might be that they have different food. Maybe you brought them a sandwich, or I don't know, maybe they're just eating chips and bread and crisps. It doesn't matter. It's not a sign of, we don't need to make it mean something if they don't sit down. So I live in the UK and lots of people have turkey and ham, or maybe they have duck. I don't even like turkey. I'm not overly keen on ham either. So it's not a sign of success if someone will eat all the Brussels sprouts and all the, I don't know, like funny sauces. That does not matter. Really try and notice where are you apportioning what's important. I would suggest that connection and relationship are the most important things. So, if your child needs to eat chips and apple and bread, well, so be it. You might need to bring your own food and be very clear about what your kids will eat. You don't need to. Their eating is not a performance or a comment on your parenting. And you might have to put some strict boundaries down with family members not to comment. We've had, so I've shared before, my husband is French, and I've got lovely parents-in-law. And for my mother-in-law particularly, food is really important. And there's lots of stuff wrapped up in it, like from a cultural perspective and from a really deeply personal perspective, which I'm not going to go into. But it's meant that our children have been very surveilled in terms of what they're eating, and a lot of comments. And it's somehow eating well is seen as good. And it's so ironic, especially for women, because eating well is seen as like having a good appetite. But then we're not commended for that as soon as we get any older. So there's such bizarre double standard in society. So we've been very clear about stop surveilling them and stop commenting. Like, how would you feel? How would I feel if someone was constantly surveilling what I was eating and commenting? Sometimes the way we treat children absolutely outrages me. And I also have to acknowledge that with my children, I also surveil them because I have really been stressed because they were so tiny. I have really been concerned about them eating enough and surviving, basically. So I've had to really step back from that. And when they are sick, that still comes up for me. So this is, a lot of this is very complex based on some of our own stuff. But I really want you to keep on thinking, what does family success look like in this context? How can we all have as nice a time as possible? We're not here to perform and get like a tick to get 20 out of 20 from whoever. That's not, you're allowed to have a good time. Your children are allowed to have a good time. Them eating a set amount of vegetables to impress like some older people there, that doesn't matter. It's not going to make a difference. And it just breaks relationship. In our family at this time, we might be watching more screens. Like, I'm happy to acknowledge that's like standards will change. The reality is we don't have people close around us who can come and look after our children. And in order for my husband and I to maybe go for a walk or for each of us to have a shower, we'll take turns to be with the kids. But sometimes they might just be watching the iPad, and that's okay. That's okay. I want you to really focus on what are your needs? How can you tend to yourself? Breaking cycles and shifting cycles in our families. It is so important to start noticing ourselves, to stop omitting ourselves, to stop expecting ourselves to be superhuman operators. You matter. You are a person. Your enjoyment matters. And if your kids are on an iPad a bit more, so be it. We've been watching a lot of videos of when my girls were babies. And frankly, that's been very joyful, and they love that. So for me, that's okay. And they sometimes each have a turn by themselves because their little nervous systems love the control. And then I might have time with the other twin, and maybe my husband goes to shower or something, and it's more peaceful. So you don't need, if there's lots of commentary from family members, you can invite them to stop it, basically. You don't need lots of commentary. You're trying to figure out how you can have the maximum connection in your family, the maximum joy, how you can deal with whatever ruptures come up in your own family, how you can talk about things. And you matter. All of the needs of your family matter. So please really think carefully about what fantasy have you created in your mind about how things need to be. Notice, laugh about your fantasy. And like me, you might have some elements that you can actually make true. Like if you really also want a fire, maybe you've actually even got a fire in your house. I don't know. But notice if the food is really, really important for you, or if you have this idea of this lovely food you can cook or eat or buy, it might be that you can actually buy some of that and really live that out. But having a fantasy about how groups of people are going to behave and how your children might be amidst that is kind of, it's a way to make yourself feel bad about everything. Don't compare yourself to something made up that's never even existed. Really try and notice how you can have joy in this present moment with these people that you are with. And as well, nourish yourself, because if you are running on empty constantly and you're keeping on omitting yourself and forgetting about your own needs, you're just going to land up really burnt out and really, really resentful. And part of shifting cycles is really starting to center ourselves in our own experience. Um, you've probably been the kind of the backup support your whole life for your parents, maybe your siblings, I don't know, if you're ever your partners, whatever. It's time to really notice yourself, start tending to yourself and acting like you matter. And I'm sending you so much love. I hope you have some pockets of joy and real enjoyment and connection for you. And there will be moments of profound irritation and probably some anger as well, maybe some rage. But keep on coming back to tending to yourself. Keep on making space for your own inner baby. Keep on noticing what your kids need. You're allowed to change plans if things are too overwhelming for you or your kids. And you're allowed to step away from old roles. And yes, it can be really uncomfortable. Okay, I'm sending you so much love. And this is being released on Tuesday the 16th. We'll have a break on the 23rd and a break on the 30th. And we'll be back with new episodes on Tuesday the 6th of January. And if you're experiencing rage, please go and buy my rage workshop, which has got some amazing information and a Q&A. And if this podcast is benefiting you, please go and leave a review somewhere. Okay, take really good care. Wishing you so much love and happy holidays.